10 years and 5 seasons of build-up have brought us to this point that the Duffer Brothers continue to claim was all planned, even though it definitely wasn't. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the finale and volumes 1 and 2, and why I think it kind of sucked.
What?
Honestly, now that the show's over, this is the only season of Stranger Things that I can say I'm not a big fan of. I didn't hate it, I just didn't like it as much as I was hoping. I felt immediately within the first episode that the wheels were just spinning on this thing, and unfortunately that persisted. These episodes are mega long, and it still feels like we're dragging out every little thing. Things that need to be explained are dragged out too far, and things that don't need to be explained are still over-explained. Season 4, of course, ended on a huge cliffhanger, and that is walked back immediately. The releases of this show is something I'd like to discuss separately, because I would say Stranger Things maybe killed television, but let's put a pin in that for a later date. I think it's hard to avoid mentioning the issue here though, because it actually does affect the story. Not only is our hype affected, because there's been a wait for the last season, but in world there's a time jump, so any tension that was there and the cliffhanger is now gone, and it has to start from the ground up, and it doesn't really get going. There is never any sense of urgency throughout most of the season. There are only a handful of moments, the ending of episode 4, and 2 moments in the finale. Characters never feel like they're in peril, even within the big boss fight at the end that kind of feels like a Resident Evil mission hitting all the weak points. There's just a lack of danger and honestly tangibility, but I'll talk about that a bit more later. Even in episode 1, Hawkins is in quarantine after the ground split in 4, but no one seems affected or to particularly care that much. Vecna feels like a shadow of his former self. He was terrifying, and that additional horror was what makes Season 4 my favourite after Season 1. Vecna and his mystery, expanding the lore of him and his role within the Upside Down and what that means in a bigger sense. Finding out what he's capable of, and that allowed for a constant brewing tension that was always climbing, and allowed our characters to actually be in peril. That scene with Max escaping is still heralded as one of the best sequences, and rightfully so, and there's nothing that comes close to that in this season. One reason for this is because there are so many moments where the episode stops for a character moment. The most egregious example is in episode 7, I think, where Holly and Max have a whole ass conversation in the Upside Down as they're trying to escape Vecna. A similar thing happens in our world where everyone's getting prepared to go in and save the kids, but they stop so Will can have his big coming out speech. Well written, and I think really well acted, but the episode literally stops for this to happen. And the same applies to Max and Holly's conversation. It's really frustrating, and bringing everything to a halt just constantly stops tension from being built. I think with Will's coming out scene, the context and how it's integrated is pretty bad. So my point is that there's no danger. I never felt there was any danger. I never feared for anyone's life, so I never really cared. And there's no real mystery either. There's not really a plot to this season. Everything is so over-explained where we don't have any questions anymore, except for the growing plot holes that only get worse in the finale. Another big thing is that characters are not written or used well. Joyce is absent for most of the season, and Mike feels sidelined too. No one acts like themselves. I think the dialogue is atrocious this season. Steve and Jonathan being so competitive over Nancy at the start was so stupid, and it doesn't feel right to me that Steve doesn't recognize what he's doing. Dustin's grief didn't feel that tangible to me because he acts as if it happened a week ago, and even though it is a while ago, he'd still be affected obviously, but there's just a general disconnect, not just with him but with every character. There are also moments where the writing is that bad I just didn't know what the intention was. Nancy and Jonathan's breakup, I kind of assumed that's what had happened, but I wasn't confident until the Duffer Brothers came out to confirm it, and you shouldn't need that. You should be able to see that from the text itself, not a statement on Twitter. The military is one of the most annoying and stupid inclusions in Season 5. They bring in Sarah Connor from Terminator 2 to play Dr. K, who is just someone we don't know or care about and has no presence, but wears Dr. Brenner's wig. I don't think anything really changes if you just remove them from the equation. That's exactly kind of what happens at the end. They just disappear. They lose Elle, which is who they were after, because they were trying to replicate the superpowers and whatnot. And then the epilogue happens and they're all set free, even though Nancy and Hopper killed so many soldiers. And also, I would have thought that the government doesn't want their knowledge getting out into the world. We could have just had a scene that was like, keep your silence, sign an NDA or something, but no, it's just, they lost Elle, and they're like, well, game's over in a bit, guys. So let's actually talk about the big finale. Probably my favourite episode of the season, but I think it's easily the worst finale of the entire show. I mostly liked the epilogue, and they leave the characters in kind of good enough spaces. It's very safe, and that's probably my biggest problem with the episode. It's so predictable. It is the most basic version of what I thought would happen, and that's what we got. So outside of where it leaves Elle, which I will talk about, I like where everyone is kind of left off. Although the epilogue is too long, it ends like 5 separate times. The radio tower sequence though, in the first half of the episode, I thought was brilliant. Probably my favourite sequence of the episode. At the same time, Elle is trying to get to Vecna, so the others don't get crushed in this merging of worlds. So a big reveal in the season was that the Upside Down is like the gateway, the in-between worlds of our reality and Dimension X, or the Abyss, another planet. Vecna is just trying to merge them. I'll admit, I don't really get why he wants to do this, other than it's revealed the Mind Flayer's been controlling him the whole time, even though in Season 4, we were told Vecna made the Mind Flayer. They just can't make up their mind. But I do think that's a legitimately cool reveal, and seeing the worlds merge is legitimately awesome, but that means the endgame is fighting the Mind Flayer on this other world. So, the Demogorgons and the Mind Flayer, they're aliens. There are loads of instances where things happen so conveniently in this episode. One of the first big ones is how humans can just breathe on this planet, apparently. I gotta talk about this planet because it's so underwhelming. It's just a barren wasteland of nothing. It sucks, and the green screens and CGI are pretty consistently bad. The highlight is the physical version of the Mind Flayer. I think it's really cool and really well crafted. I love how it contorts from the claw into its real form, but then I'm not sure what the shadowy version is. Is that just another form it can take? Is that like a shadow we see through the Upside Down being the middle world? I don't know, but this world is an insane disappointment because there's also no real build-up to this dimension, and even less build-up to the Mind Flayer. I can't remember a time they bring up the Mind Flayer in this season, so for it to be the endgame, more so than Vecna, was lackluster. And they're both killed way too easily in a bad CGI fight. There was no weight to the action, no intimidation from the Mind Flayer or Vecna throughout pretty much the entire sequence. There's no tangibility to this world and no danger to it. This is supposed to be the home of everything evil we've seen, and we don't see any of it. It's barren. There was no sign of life outside of the Mind Flayer. It reminded me of the Flash final act, and that's not a comparison that you want. There are also elements of this first episode that raise more questions. The fact that Hopper and Joyce knew Vecna/Henry in high school, but this is never brought up, so why was it established in the first place? Henry gets added some more backstory. He finds a scientist holding a briefcase that has a rock that kind of bonds with him like the Venom symbiote, which turns out to be a rock from Dimension X or the Abyss, the other planet. How he got it, I don't know, because I think this was before Brenner opened the portals, but from that point on, the Mind Flayer is controlling Vecna, I guess, or Henry. But how does the scientist get there? Who was he working for? What was all that about? Doesn't matter, apparently. We also never find out why Vecna took Will specifically in Season 1. The Duffer Brothers said that we would find that out. We haven't. I think if one thing is for sure for the last couple years is that writers for shows and films shouldn't promote the shows. Leave it to the marketing team.
I don't even think you really know what a bad day is.
But on that note with Will, we never see him detached from the hive mind. All the seasons, including this one, we've seen him affected when a Demogorgon's burned or hurt and stuff like that. He's a part of the hive mind, except for when it dies. Should he not be on the brink of death here or something? Like, he's not affected by it at all. And probably the worst one. All the pregnant women that the military were holding in the Upside Down. We found out in Volume 2, I believe, that's what Dr. K's doing. Redoing Dr. Brenner's experiments to try and have these children, we find rows and rows of pregnant women kept in this base in the Upside Down. But we never see them evacuated, we never see them taken out. I don't think they're ever mentioned again. And then the Upside Down is just destroyed. So I guess they just fucking exploded. That's insane. There are many more plot holes that many others have mentioned, but the last one I want to really discuss comes at the ending, where Elle gives her life so the military can stop chasing her and her friends. Or does she? They don't fucking know. The writing is so unclear. Elle speaks to Mike in the void, despite the fact that they're suppressing her powers, so she can't do that. And that leaves Mike with a theory that Callie made an illusion so that everyone thought Elle was dead. So it's either that and she ran away, or she died. I hate both. For sure, Mike probably learned what happened to Callie, so, you know, that bit makes sense. But let's first look at if Elle does die. I don't like that because that feels like a very undeserved ending for this character. She's been abused her entire life. If anyone deserves a happy ending, it's her. Especially after the speech that Hopper gives earlier in the episode, giving Elle every reason why she doesn't have to die, why she can break the cycle and be happy. It would feel weird to kill her off. on the version if she did escape and Callie did project an illusion to trick everyone, how did she know when to do it? Like, that is impeccable timing. And how did Mike come up with the theory? Because my first impression was that Elle told him in the void, but she wouldn't have been able to, even if she got out of range of the suppressors, because I don't see her having that much time. I mean, I like that version more, I guess, just because she survives, but still despise it because she chooses to leave everyone. Once again, despite Hopper's speech. I thought the speech was great. I thought David Harbour did a brilliant job, and I think the moment where he thinks he shot her is incredible, and the only other moment outside of when Steve nearly falls as a moment I locked in out of fear. She has the chance to have that normal life, have that happiness with everyone that she's grown with as a family, but chooses to leave them all behind, and I don't find that in character for her really either. And it's all made worse by the fact that it's basically just a death scene, except they're like, she doesn't have to be if you don't want her to be, and it's just frustrating. It's just a cop-out. Talking about the characters, again, so many more interactions that just feel unnatural and weird. When Mike and Will talk about Will's coming out, that's a really strange conversation. We also get new characters like Holly to focus on more this season, and her friends that are taken by Vecna. I mean, this is the end to all the characters that we've been following. Why are we introducing new people and new plots at this point? I thought this was meant to be the grand end to what started in Season 1, and the main character of Season 1 is barely in this season. Steve, Nancy, Will, Robin, and Jonathan, and then there were just side characters that are completely absent from the epilogue. Vicky, Erica, and Murray are all not to be seen. This is a few more days after the finale, and I wanted to just jump back in to discuss a few more things. Firstly, I do want to say, it's okay if you liked the ending. You are allowed to like the ending. Do not let me take that away from you. I always go into everything hoping that I enjoy it, but I'm okay with the fact that I might not, even if it is frustrating at times. I mean, I'm a Doctor Who fan, for God's sake. Do not let me or anyone else ruin your enjoyment of the episode. I am friends with a few people that actually really enjoyed the finale, and I fight them on it. We go to war over why I disagree in pretty much every aspect. But it's all in good fun. One of the things that I wanted to go back to was the ending and how maybe it's left ambiguous. But no, Elle's dead. Like, she's dead, right? Because there's no way that Callie is alive when those final moments even take place. She would have bled out way before they made it back to the real world, and if she hadn't, she was in the hospital when it exploded, so she would have been the first one to go. Meaning, the idea that Elle escaped is just Mike's cope, which is okay, in theory, except for the way they present it. I just don't think it's conveyed very effectively, very well. And as I said earlier, it feels like a cop-out more than anything. Also, since I filmed the initial video, the Duffer Brothers have been talking rather quite a bit. I've already kind of said in this video that if you need to explain everything about the show, you've not done the best job at actually writing it. And don't get me wrong, there is plenty of people without media literacy who need things spoon-fed to them. But I think it's safe to say a lot of people are in the same boat when they have genuine issues with how this season is written. For example, when they were asked about where the Demogorgons and the bats and everything were in the abyss, they just said, they don't know, they guess they're somewhere. Guys, this is your show, you know you can choose what happens, right? It's giving Game of Thrones Season 8. I guess Vecna just forgot he had an entire planet's army at his disposal. On the topic of Vecna taking 12 children, they said they don't know because they like the symbolism with the clocks. When asked about Will and the hive mind, they say, well, we didn't show it. Which feels like a child's excuse of, if you don't see something, it didn't happen. Like, what are we talking about here? You're writing a $400 million show. I would hope there was more thought put into it than this, because these are important things. These aren't just nitpicks. I remember a quote from a while ago where they said that this season was going to be much closer to Season 1, with the original gang back in Hawkins, but Joyce is barely here, and the finale takes place on this Helldivers map green screen, so that was just a straight up lie. Another plot hole that's been bugging me, I think, is that I don't believe we ever got an explanation as to why time froze in the Upside Down. And as much as I am kind of shitting on the Duffer Brothers here and will continue to make fun and to criticize everything about this season, I have seen a worrying amount of people really just using it as an excuse to abuse them, pretty much, which you never like to see. It's never appropriate. And I like to think that most of us are better than that. But I also wanted to mention the Mind Flare again, since I've turned a little on the kaiju design. I do still think it's well designed and well crafted, but in contrast to how we'd seen it before, I prefer that design so much more. It came off like a cosmic entity that you can't just shoot or stab. I think maybe the fact that it's a big kaiju alien wasn't the best resolution for this terrifying creature. But I think that's about all I wanted to jump in and say. If by the time this video comes out, the Duffer Brothers have said anything more silly, just talk amongst yourselves. So that's the end of Stranger Things, until the spin-offs that they inevitably do. By the time they come out, I'll probably be dead anyway. I think seasons 1 to 4 are genuinely great seasons of TV. They have flaws, all of them, and before now, season 2 was probably my least favourite, but I don't think it's close anymore. I think season 5 is far and away the worst. It's dragged out to an extreme amount, and I was never hooked. There's a severe lack of stakes for the plot and the characters, and I wasn't really particularly engaged this season. Highlights were the ending of episode 4. I think Jonathan and Steve in the finale have a great bond, and that relationship growing is really nice to see. As I say, I think the epilogue works good enough to leave the characters in satisfying positions, except for Elle. But I think the action is worse. I think the CGI is worse. I think it looks pretty bad. I think the tone is incredibly poor. I hate the direction that they've gone. I really thought they brought back a bit of the tension and horror with season 4, but they completely walk all of that back this season. At the end of every episode, I never once felt the urge to really watch the next one. I was just getting through it. They couldn't even kill off a character confidently at the end, and the one character that does die for definite is one that showed up 3 seasons ago with like a total of 20 minutes screen time. I like the passing of the torch with Mike and his friends, seeing Holly and her friends playing D&D, seeing the next generation. I do think that's really nice. As a big finale to the story of Stranger Things, I found this immensely disappointing. I think because it didn't really feel like there was much story. Performances, I hate to say, also felt pretty inconsistent. I hate dogging on actors because it's a very difficult job and I can't act for shit, but it's notable because they've been so good throughout the other 4 seasons, but there are just the odd scenes where performances kind of got a laugh out of me when they weren't supposed to. But to be honest, it felt like we were just waiting for the end through most of this season, really dragging it out, really spinning its wheels, and honestly not much does happen. As I've already said a few times, I think this is by far and away comfortably the worst of Stranger Things, so that's a shame. As a grand finale, I think Stranger Things 5, at absolute best, ends up as mid.